Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Oh my goodness, let me just get my Bible. Very important part of our meeting every morning. Welcome. Welcome, everybody, to Activate Her with me, Sally Goodwin, and to Friday Feasts. You can see I've tried to orientate myself a little bit differently so that I don't have the sun rising on the one side of my face. Because it gets a little bit warm there. But welcome to Activate Her with me, Sally Goodwin, on a Friday morning at 7 a.m. and on a Monday morning at 7 a.m. and on a Wednesday morning at 7 a.m. And welcome to Friday Feasts. Friday, much the same as the other days, but we focus on the fact that we are feasting on the Word of God and feasting on the presence of God. Good morning, my beautiful Brigitte. Welcome this morning to this online community, to this church without walls. And I just declare over you this morning, Brigitte, that you are able to watch this morning and in peace, in the shalom of Jesus. Welcome, Geraldine. It's so good to see you on this morning, my new friend. Love meeting new friends. Good morning, special Sylvia. Welcome, heroic Hilda. Yes, the table is set for the feast. Good morning, special Samantha. Lovely to have you on the live. Welcome, beautiful Bertha. So good to see you, my friend. Good morning, terrific Tishka. So good to see you, my lovely. Welcome, wonderful Volna. Wow, you're all coming on thick and fast now, hey? It was really good. Good morning, Radiant Renelle. It is so good to see you on this morning, my friend. You don't always get to make the lives. Good morning, lovely Renelle Ware, my gorgeous friend. So good to see you. Welcome, everybody. And of course, it's such a treat because every second week I get to see beautiful Tishka twice. twice in 1 week, which is I'm exceptionally grateful. School holidays, Renelle. Okay, wonderful. So you see, all my children are out of school now, so I am out of the loop of school holidays completely. Good morning, Conrad. Oh, bless you, my friend. Bless you, love you, and so appreciate your faithfulness in showing up 3 times a week. Honestly, as one of the few men who's prepared to actually show his face on the live. I do have a few men who watch and follow. Good morning, Joyful Jen. But not all of them are as courageous as Conrad. Conrad and Stu are my 2 faithful male followers who show themselves up. So, who show themselves up on the live. I mean, not show themselves up on the live. So good to see you all. Good morning, special Sylvia. I am blessed with multiple Sylvias in my life, and it's so special. So welcome. Good morning, my Tessa friend. Welcome, gorgeous Tessa. And just as for this morning, joyful Jackie, are you looking forward to feasting, my friend? Delightful Diane, welcome. As my gorgeous Mama Tessa's name came up, I just would appreciate all of you beautiful people praying for us on Sunday. Tessa and myself and Devan. It is Caleb, our gorgeous Dr. Jen. Caleb is her baby. She has 2 babies, Sebastian and Caleb, but Caleb is the littlest one. And it is his dedication on Sunday morning. And I have the enormous privilege of having been asked by Dr. Jen before she stepped into the arms of Jesus to be Caleb's godmother. And Devan and Tessa are honoring Jen's request, and so we are doing his dedication on Sunday morning, and I will be Caleb's godmother. So I would appreciate prayers for Tessa, for myself, for Devan, for Rose, who's going to be doing the dedication, as far as I know. I would appreciate prayers for all of us, because obviously it will be a very tender, very special, very anointed time, but also there is always going to be a level of sadness, because we would all prefer in our flesh and in our natural human hearts to have Jen there with us. While Caleb was being dedicated, we would have loved for Jenny to be there. And Lauren, please be praying for Lauren as well. Lauren will also be there, obviously, as Jenny's special sister. So please, good morning, lovely Tamsin. Good morning, amazing Arena, my friend. I've been praying for you. I haven't seen you on the live for a little while, but lovely to have you. So yes, if you could just spare a prayer over this weekend for us for Sunday, we would appreciate that. Just that there would be peace in all of our hearts, that we would be able to enjoy and celebrate the beautiful occasion, that we would be able to remember Jenny and feel all the love that we all have for her, and at the same time that grief and sorrow will not be allowed to overtake us or steal from this beautiful occasion, but it will be special and lovely. And yeah, so if you could just pray. Thank you. Good morning, amazing Anthea. We would so appreciate that, and I just so look forward to being a part of Tessa and Lauren and Devan and Sebastian and Caleb's lives for as long as I am on this earth. And then join in their cloud of witnesses to cheer them on when I step into eternity. So I'm really looking forward to that. Just good morning, Gaynor. Welcome this morning. I'm not sure that I've seen your name before, so you are very welcome in this beautiful community, in this beautiful church without walls, into this family that is truly a family, truly a family. So welcome, Gaynor. It is good to have you on this morning. So yes, ladies and gentlemen, we had our second online prophetic meeting on Wednesday, and I'm trusting that those of you who were part of the online prophetic group on Wednesday could attest to the fact that it was a divinely appointed time. I definitely feel like it was. Good morning, lovely Curl. Curl is actually a member of our, good morning, famous Chantal. Curl is a member of our in-person prophetic group, but she has been traveling for work, and so she joined our online group on Wednesday, and it was really amazing and so good to have some of the in-person people on the online group because they couldn't be here. I love you, my Tessa, and I'm so grateful for you. So privileged to have you in my life, my friend. Good morning, Radiant Roz. Lovely to see you. And all of you greeting each other. I love that, because that's what makes it a community. That's what makes it a church without walls, where we can... I'm so glad, Cole, because Cole has now been to the in-person and to the online. And, it is always my prayer that the online prophetic school will be just as anointed and powerful as the in-person school. And sometimes, as someone who preaches or teaches, it feels different, because when you're standing in front of a live audience and you can see people's faces, I mean, on Zoom I can see their faces, but in front of a live audience I can hear their reaction, I can hear, their comments, their feedback as we talk, etc., etc. And in the online, on the Zoom, it's not always as easy. I can see people's faces and but they're all muted, obviously, because otherwise it's too distracting. And I can see them grinning or laughing or sort of waving their hands when I say something, that really resonates with them. But as someone who leads it, I just often wonder whether I trust in the Holy Spirit, who is much more powerful than me, that the anointing is the same, because there's no distance in the Spirit and technology is there for us to use. But, my natural human fleshly side just sometimes wonders if everything comes across the same way. So when somebody like Cole has been to both, and Hilda has been to both, it's so good to know that it's the same, that they experience the same thing, whether it's in person or online. So I'm grateful for that feedback, Cole. Thank you, my lovely. Grateful for that testimony. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, It is so good to see you all this morning, and I just want to tell you this morning, I want to just take a moment to just express my appreciation for each and every one of you, for the prayers that I receive, for the testimonies I receive, for the messages I receive, just for all of you who reach out to me. And just because I just have this whole community of friends and spiritual daughters and people that I just love to the depths of my being, and people who fill my cup and fill my heart, and I'm so grateful for each and every one of you, so grateful. So I really appreciate you. Okay, so we are going to move on and finish with the story of Esther this morning, because Purim begins at sunset on tomorrow evening, Saturday the 23rd. So today is the 22nd of March 2024, and it is the 12th of Adar, the 12th of Adar too. So tomorrow, being Saturday, is the 13th of Adar. So at sunset tomorrow evening, because the Jewish calendar works from sunset to sunset, not like our calendar works, from sunrise to sunrise, pretty much. I know it's not exactly like that, but you know what I mean. So the Jewish calendar works from sunset to sunset. So at sunset tomorrow evening, the 14th of Adar begins, and Purim runs through from sunset on the 13th of Adar through to sunset on the 14th of Adar. So that is it tomorrow. Oh, thank you, beautiful Curl. Thank you, lovely Roz. Good morning, Tilly. Lovely to see you, my friend. So we are going to finish with the story of Esther today, as she is the reason that we celebrate, or that the Jewish people and some believers who follow the prophetic calendar, Hebrew prophetic calendar, celebrate Purim. And so we have gotten through the book of Esther, and we have gotten to Esther we've done Esther chapter 1 and Esther chapter 2, and we are going to move rapidly through the next few chapters, which, oh golly, okay, so I've only done 2 chapters and there are another 8, but we don't have to go into all the different details, because we all know the story of Esther, but there are just things that I want to highlight. And if you are on here for the first time and you haven't watched Start Your Week with Sally, from Monday this week, and Wisdom Wednesdays from Wednesday this week, then please go back and watch those 2, because that is where I started with this message about Esther. So Monday and Wednesday's teachings are crucial to continuing with the story of Esther for the rest of the story. So we all know what happened in the first 2 chapters, and I'm not going to go back and repeat those, because otherwise we will run out of time again. But as we know, in Esther chapter 3 verse 1, the biblical text tells us that King Xerxes, or King Ahasuerus, but I'm rather going to call him Xerxes because it's easier, promoted Haman, son of Hammedatha the Agagite, and exalted him and seated him higher than all the princes with him. And I explained on Wednesday, and I'm just going to repeat this again so that we can hold the story in context. I explained on Wednesday how so often we have these prophetic promises and prophetic words from the Lord over us, and we walk through all of these trials and tribulations and things to reach the point where we step into what God has for us. And when we step into what God has for us, we think that basically, that we've made it. We've reached that point. We've kind of, scaled the mountain. We're standing on the top of the mountain. We're there. We done, kind of thing. But what we don't always realize, or what we're not always on guard for, is the fact that whilst God was elevating us to be in this position of influence and affluence, and step into our destiny and calling, and have our Esther 4:14 moment, the enemy has been elevating someone to oppose that position. So we fight quite hard, many battles, to get to that position. And then we sometimes think that the battle is won. And what we don't realize is that a battle is won, but the battle is still to come. So here is Haman, and Haman has been elevated to the highest position in the kingdom. And it doesn't tell, nothing here tells us why. But what is interesting about Haman is, remember, and I can't think now exactly where it is, I didn't look the scripture up, but in the Old Testament, beautiful Brenda, my gorgeous friend, in the Old Testament, oh, please, ladies and gentlemen, if you could like and share, I would so appreciate that. If you could be my media missionaries and my digital evangelists and like and share these teachings and get them out into the online world so we can take territory for the kingdom, I would really appreciate that. Okay, so if I'm not sure if you remember in further back in the Old Testament, when Samuel told Saul when they went to war against the Amalekites, and God said that the evil of the Amalekites had reached its fullness. And Samuel told Saul that the word of the Lord was that the Amalekites must be completely destroyed. Everything, all the Amalekites, all the, everything that they possessed had to be completely destroyed because they had reached the zenith of their evil. They had, God gives grace for a period of time. And, all of the people who existed on the earth knew in some form of another that there was a God, but they chose to worship other things, to worship false gods, to worship idols, and they basically stepped into such evil, and God allowed them a grace period for their evil, for them to reach the zenith of their evil, the fullness of the evil. And then he was like, okay, that is enough now. We can't allow this to continue. So Saul had a command from Samuel, from the Lord, to completely destroy everything related to the Amalekites. And he didn't. He was disobedient. If you remember the story, he keeps the king alive because the king, it was a whole kind of an ego thing and a boasting thing to have, especially if it was a powerful nation and a powerful army that you defeated, to have the king. They liked to kind of parade them, in front of, back then in ancient biblical times, ancient Middle Eastern times, they liked to parade the conquered kings, in chains and through the streets of their towns and awful stuff. But and because that was very much an ego thing for the king that had conquered the other kings. And if you were conquered by those people, they would do the same thing to you. So it was that kind of thing of, you would do it to me, so I'm going to do it to you, that whole thing. And then Saul, he hadn't slaughtered all the cattle and things that were there, and he kept the king alive. And remember, Samuel flies into a rage, and he says, you have disobeyed God. And that was basically the final nail in Saul's coffin, when he actually, God decided that he was going to raise up David as king. And what many scholars and theologians believe is that there were some of the Amalekites that, because Saul saved all the cattle and saved all that sort of thing, and because he hadn't put the king to death, that there were probably some of the Amalekites that weren't wiped out, possibly women who the soldiers, the Hebrew soldiers saw, like young women who they thought were beautiful and wanted to take for themselves, and they didn't. It's terrible to talk about wiping out a nation, believe you me. There's some things in the Old Testament that are difficult to swallow, but we just, but so what people believe is that there were literal Amalekites who managed to escape, and that Haman was actually descended from the Amalekites, from one or two of the Amalekites that managed to escape, or that weren't actually killed as had been commanded, and that that hatred for the Jewish people and that rage had literally built up, over generations, and found its fulfillment in Haman. So that's what many scholars and theologians believe. And so Haman now is, also again raised to this high position, and his ego is in full force, and he walks past Mordecai, and Mordecai does not bow to him, because the Jewish people only bowed to the Lord. So and they would obviously bow to the king, because everybody did, but they wouldn't bow like, as if to God, to anybody else. So Mordecai did not bow, and Haman was absolutely enraged by that, which you can just tell is completely irrational and ridiculous. And so he then decides not just to destroy Mordecai, but to destroy all the Jewish people. And here we get to the mentions of the Hebrew calendar, where in Esther chapter 3 verse 7 it says, in the first month, which is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of sovereign, someone cast. So basically what Haman did was Haman cast lots to decide when to enact this genocide against the Jewish people because of what Mordecai had done. And that is why Purim is called Purim, because that's the word for casting lots. It's literally that simple. There's nothing very, significant in it from that perspective. It's just as simple as that's the word for casting lots. So then Haman goes to King Xerxes. And now remember that nobody knows that Esther is Jewish. Nobody knows that Esther is Jewish. So Xerxes doesn't know that Esther is Jewish. But can you believe King Xerxes? We spoke last time about how volatile he is, how it's well known that he was volatile, that he was a very heavy drinker, that he was prone to fits of rage. Oh my goodness, it feels like I'm being visited by some dignitary. Someone's about to land a helicopter on my balcony. My word, I don't know if you can hear that helicopter go past, but that was so loud. Felt like it was going to fly right into the window. Good morning, Corrine. So this is how volatile and how impractical King Xerxes is from this perspective, because a man goes to him and says, there are these people in the provinces of your reign who have been exiled here, whose laws are different to your laws, and so it's not in your interests, King Xerxes, to let them live. So write a decree, and I will give you 10,000 talents of silver to bring into the palace's treasuries. Now, what one needs to remember is that kings in those days always needed money to go to war. War required a lot of money. And so in order to be a war-hungry, warfaring nation, which those nations were in those days, and nations still are today, it required a lot of money. So when Haman suggested this to King Xerxes, and it came with an investment into the treasury of the palace, King Xerxes would have definitely been interested, because he needed to maintain Persia's position as the conquering nation, and that took money. And he didn't know who the Jewish people were. Good morning, my beautiful. Enjoy your cuppa. I have my cuppa too. My cup says, love in my heart and coffee in my hand. Welcome, my friend. Earrings and mugs. Earrings, mugs, and shoes are the three things I love. So this is King Xerxes. He doesn't even bother to kind of figure out who these people are, why Haman would be interested in wiping them out. He just says, okay, go for it. He calls in his scribes, he writes a decree, sends the decree out to every single province. And it says here in Esther chapter 3, verse 13, and the letters were sent by the runners into all the king's provinces to cut off, to slay, and to destroy all the Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, So they had one day to do this, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to plunder their possessions. A copy of the writing was to be made law in every province, was published for all people to be ready for that day. So off they go, and so they're not just allowed to wipe out the Jewish people, but also to take all their possessions, which would have been very tempting for the people of Persia. So Mordecai hears about this. Mordecai puts on sackcloth and ashes and sits in the middle of the city and cries out, and he goes up to the gates of the king's palace. And throughout all the provinces, it tells us in Esther chapter 4, there was great mourning among the Jewish people, and they were fasting and weeping and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes, because this was huge. This was genocide. And it wasn't even genocide that just rose up and happened. This was a genocide that they got to anticipate and expect. So it wasn't, so I often wonder how many of them packed up and left, didn't have faith for God to deliver them the way he had delivered them out of Egypt, but actually packed up and left and went back to Jerusalem or moved somewhere else, or, how many of the Jewish people fled once that decree had been issued. The Bible doesn't mention anything about that because that's not the point of the story. But I always wonder about the extenuating circumstances, or the extraneous circumstances, should I say. So Esther hears about what's going on with Mordecai, and she sends clothes for him to wear, and he refuses. And then she asks the gentleman who looks after the eunuch, the one in authority, she asks him to go and find out from Mordecai what is going on. And so Mordecai tells him about what the king has decreed, and he asks him to show it to Esther and to explain it to her and to command her. This is Esther chapter 4, verse 8. To command her to go into the king, to make supplication to him and plead before him for her people. Now, this is like, third person. So Mordecai speaks to the eunuch tells Esther. Esther speaks to the eunuch tells Mordecai. Mordecai speaks to the eunuch tells Esther. What amazes me is in all of this, and this is why we need to pay attention to the whole story, because you know how we talk about how Esther found favor with this particular eunuch, how Esther found favor with the people in the palace. In any other circumstance or situation, this eunuch would have gone to the king or to Haman with what was going on. But he doesn't. Remember, his loyalty is to the king. It is supposed to be to the king. And he would be rewarded if he, like Mordecai, was telling about the plot to kill King Xerxes, he would be rewarded if he went to the king and said what was happening and this communication that was going on between Mordecai and Esther, because nobody knew that Esther was Jewish. So why would she be communicating with Mordecai, who was a known Jew? And who was bemoaning and bewailing and all of this anticipated genocide of his people. But the fact that Esther found favor it wasn't just simply in the harem and that she got the best of everything. It was the fact that this eunuch never reported what was happening because Esther had found favor with him. That favor never left. It remained. So that communication between Esther and the eunuch and Mordecai and the eunuch and Esther, where they were both, Esther and Mordecai were completely open about what they were talking about and about what was happening, meant that Esther trusted this eunuch. And she trusted him because she had found favor with him. So that favor that she got in the beginning, that we spend so much time focusing on, actually plays out through the rest of the book, through the rest of the story. And we just see it in that little point, that little space in the beginning. But it's actually, the favor has so much more impact. So much more impact. So they have this conversation. And Esther sends him back to Mordecai and says, all the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces, in other words, you, Mordecai, know that any man or woman who goes into the inner court to the king who has not been called, he has but one law to put to death, except the one to whom the king holds out the golden scepter, who then shall live. But I have not been called to come into the king these 30 days. So Esther, tells us in the text that the king loved Esther above everybody else, and he chose her to be his queen. But she hadn't seen him for a month. The fact that she was his queen, the fact that he loved her above everybody else, didn't mean that she was the only one that he was being intimate with. And it doesn't mean that he actually made a point of particularly seeing her. She hadn't seen him for a month. And he was either amusing himself with other women, or he was planning, wars and things, or probably a little bit of both. So, when we romanticize the story of Esther, and we romanticize this beautiful love story where, this young girl meets this gorgeous king and they live happily ever after, that was not Esther's life. And it tells us in the text, that was not Esther's life at all. It wasn't that then she spent every day and every night with the king, safely in his arms. That it didn't work like that at all. And we just don't pay attention to that. And because we don't pay attention to it, we do not fully honor the sacrifice Esther made. We think of it just as she risked her life to save her people. And God was with her and she didn't die. She didn't die, but she laid down her life because she never left that palace. It just amazes me. So she says to Mordecai, everybody knows, including you, Mordecai, because you work in the palace, that you can't just go and see the king. And the king is this volatile that if you go and see him without him calling you, he just puts you to death. I mean, can you even imagine? And so Mordecai says to Esther, now let's remember this as well. Esther, as far as the text is concerned, is Mordecai's only family. He has raised her. He has loved her. He has looked after her. They belong to each other in terms of family, and the Bible doesn't tell us that there are any other family around. And no other family are mentioned in the book of Esther. This is possibly his only living relative, close relative, put it that way. And here he tells this young girl that has been orphaned, exiled, trafficked, had to give her virginity up to someone that she wouldn't have chosen to give her virginity to, forced to marry somebody outside of the Jewish faith, forced to hide who she is, her identity as a Jew, had her name changed, her whole identity completely either hidden or stripped away from her. We, particularly I would imagine as moms, would be like, it's fine, save yourself. Make sure you're okay. Mordecai says to Esther in Esther chapter 4, verse 13, do not think within yourself to escape in the king's palace any more than all the other Jews. For if you, this is Esther chapter 4, verse 14. This is what we talk about when we talk about an Esther 4:14 moment. For if you keep entirely silent at this time, relief and deliverance shall arise for the Jews from another place, while you and your father's house perish. And who knows whether you have come to the reign for such a time as this. This is what Mordecai says to her. Don't think you're going to escape. don't think you are going to be safe in the palace of King Xerxes. Mordecai's faith was so incredible that he knew and believed that if Esther did not do what Esther was called to do, God would deliver the Jewish people via another means. Somebody else would rise up to deliver the Jewish people. It wasn't that Mordecai was petrified of the Jews being slaughtered. He wasn't. He was calling attention to the injustice and the unrighteousness that had been perpetrated by the sackcloth and ashes and the weeping and the wailing. He was calling attention to injustice and unrighteousness. But he wasn't actually in fear that the Jewish people would be slaughtered, because he says clearly, if you do not do what God has called you to do, God will raise up another deliverer for the Jews. God will redeem. God will deliver. But you, he says to her, will not survive. You and your father's house. In other words, if Esther perished, her lineage, the lineage of her parents, would be completely destroyed. If she did not step into the calling of the Lord on her life at that moment, her lineage would end there. There would be no fruit from that generational line. Her father's house would be destroyed, and she would be destroyed. How did Mordecai know that she wouldn't survive if she didn't step in? Only God. God isn't mentioned, but it could only have been God. And so we all, and we are in a season, this wartime season, where the nations are at war, where there's war in the spiritual realm, where all of these things are happening. Each one of us are having Esther 4:14 moments. We just have to recognize them, where God is saying, it is time for you to step in to what I have called you to for the sake of others. Not for the sake of yourself. You have to die to yourself. You have to lay down your life. You have to sacrifice. You have to surrender. Because it's not just you and your family that need to be saved or need to be delivered or need to be redeemed at this time. But it is your whole sphere of influence, your community, your church, your region, your nation, your people, your tribe. They all need to be redeemed and delivered. And God is calling you. And do not think, oh, well, if I don't do what God is asking me to do, he will raise up somebody else to do it. Yes, he probably would. But do you want to stand in front of Jesus one day and for Jesus to say, wow, I asked you to do this, and I'm not saying that from a condemnatory point of view. Please hear me on this. I'm not saying that from a condemnatory point of view. I've said this many times on this platform, and I'm going to say it again. I tend to be a little bit of an overachiever and a little bit of a perfectionist, and quite hard on myself, I'm just being honest. Because perfectionism is not a good thing. Excellence is brilliant, perfectionism is not, and there's a fine line between the two. But when I think of my scroll in heaven, and I think of all the things that Jesus has listed on my scroll to do and for him on this earth, not things to do for me, not things that will make me great or bring glory to my name, but things to do that will bring glory to God, that will build for eternity, that will build a kingdom. And when I think of standing before Jesus one day in excitement and him unrolling my scroll, and I want him to look through all of those things and be like, wow, yes, Sally, you did this and you did that, not because I want recognition, not because I need validation, not because I need affirmation, because I want to do it for the glory of God. I want to see Jesus get his just reward. I want people to be saved, to come to Jesus, to know the beauty and the glory and the incredible significance and power and anointing that they walk in, that God has placed inside them, that they get to meet this incredible Lord of all the earth. And see their lives have meaning, and see how significant they are in this world that we live in today, where so many people feel so insignificant. They feel so worthless. They feel so not good enough for anything or anybody. I want them to know that there is a God in heaven that sees them as enough, that loved them enough to send his own son to die for them, that wants them to step into everything he has for them. I don't want the glory for me. I want the glory for God. And so one day when I stand before God and he unrolls my scroll and he's saying to me, "You well done, good and faithful servant," who of us don't want to hear that? And he's like, "You did this and you did this and you did this." It's not because I want to be all puffed up and my ego needs to be stroked. It's because I want to see that look on Jesus's face, that he got his just reward, that glory was brought to him, that the kingdom was built for him, for God, and for the people who follow God. And I always say, I want to see all those boxes ticked, and then at the end, I want to see things that have been added hastily by the angels, where Jesus is like, we didn't even actually put this on your list of things to do, but you did them, and we just added them because we thought they were a really good idea. That's me. That's me. That's how I feel about that. And I have had conversations with the Lord where God has said to me, "Are you willing to lay your life down?" I mean, many of you who know me know my health challenges, and some of you who know me and are part of the prophetic school know that my most recent health challenge, and you know what that could potentially look like in the future. But I have had so many conversations with the Lord where God has said to me, "Will you lay your life down for me?" And that is not something that you just answer lightly. You don't just say, "Yes, Lord." You have to think that through. Are you prepared to surrender everything? Are you prepared to sacrifice everything? Because we think, "Oh yes, we'll lay our lives down for Jesus," because we don't see a whole lot of physical martyrdom in our spaces that we occupy. But you never know when that could come to your nation. So when God has asked me that question, I have had to consider carefully, would I lay my family down, my children? Would I lay my husband down? Would I lay myself down, my desires, my dreams, my wants, my needs? Would I lay my physical life down if that's what it came to? Those are conversations God and I have often, because he keeps checking that I'm still feel the same way. I had an encounter with Jesus, and this might offend some people because of just because of some of our belief systems, but it was my encounter, so I suggest you choose not to be offended. I had an encounter with Jesus a couple of years ago when I was halfway through this health battle that I'm struggling through, and it actually hasn't gotten better, particularly my health battle. It's gotten worse. And I had this encounter where I was sitting on this bench with Jesus, in the spirit, where there is this bench that Jesus and I sit on together, and it looks out, it's at the very top of a mountain, and it just looks out over, just over beauty. And we sit on this bench together, Jesus and I, and we chat. And in this encounter, we were sitting on this bench together, and Jesus said to me, "Sally, if I never healed you, would you still say yes to everything I've called you to do? I can heal you right now. But if I never healed you, would you say yes still? Do I still have your yes?" And it's very difficult to refuse Jesus anything when he's sitting next to you. But I said to him, "Yes, Lord, you will always have my yes." And now that health battle has worsened and it has gotten more challenging, but he still has my yes. He still has my yes. and he will have my yes no matter what. And that is what Esther did. So Mordecai replies this to Esther, and Esther's response back to Mordecai says, go gather all the Jewish people who are present in Shushan or in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I too and my young women shall fast in the same way. Then I shall go to the king, which is against the law, and these famous words, which we say, but do we mean them? And if I shall perish, I shall perish. If I shall perish, I shall perish. It just moves my heart so much that this girl was prepared to lay down her life for her people. And just to say to the Lord, the privilege of saying to the God who gave up his own life for you, yes, I will do this for you. And if I perish, I perish. The privilege of being able to do that, of being able to have such love. It just every time, it just gets me every single time. It's so incredible. And so we know the story, and we know that Esther goes to the king, takes her life in her hands, literally, and goes to see the king. And the king holds out the golden scepter. Now I want you to understand again the favor that Esther has been granted with the people in the palace. This favor, even with the king who hadn't seen her for a month, is apparent yet again. Yet again, the favor Esther was granted wasn't just so that she could be treated extra specially well and get extra special things and have her own little house with her and her servants. The favor on Esther's life was not to make Esther's life easier, although it did in some ways. The favor on Esther's life was so that she could be the vehicle that God used to redeem and deliver her people. And some of us have favor on our lives, where we live these lives where we have everything we need, we have everything we want, and we think that is the only reason that we have favor. The favor on your life is not just for you. It's not just for you. It is for the people that you are called to. And we sit back in comfort and we just like, oh Lord, we're so grateful for the favor on our lives, and we're so grateful for everything you've given us. And God is saying to you, yes, I love you and I want to put favor on you, and I'm glad that you're enjoying it, but it isn't just for you. It isn't just for you. And we forget that sometimes. And then Esther invites him to this feast along with Haman. And the king is feeling incredibly generous, and he's like, you can have half the kingdom if you want. And again, do you not think that was possibly tempting? Do you not think that was possibly tempting when the king says to Esther, you can have half my kingdom? You can have half my kingdom if you want. Imagine being in that position. This person who's had everything stripped away from you. Your roots, your identity, everything has been stripped away from you. And here you stand, basically about to risk your life for your people. And the king says to you, I will give you anything you want, up to half my kingdom. Do you not think that was tempting? Do you know the freedom and the liberation that Esther could have walked in if she had said yes to that offer? Do you know that she could have thought, well, I can save the Jewish people in half the kingdom, possibly, and then I can have half the kingdom, and all the things I could do in that half of the kingdom, and everything that could give me, and she could have been thinking of all the good she could do if she owned half the kingdom. She could have been thinking of all the good she could do for herself, for her people. It's similar to when Satan offered Jesus the kingdoms of the world in order for him to bow down to Satan. The devil is not very creative. He uses the same things, the same snares over and over again. And so many people who are called by God, anointed, powerful people, fall when the enemy offers them half the kingdom or the kingdoms of the world. But Esther says no, and she has this feast. And in the meantime, Haman is frustrated by Mordecai, and he goes and asks and sets up and organizes for Mordecai to be impaled on a stake and all of this kind of thing. But that night, King Xerxes can't sleep, and he asks his servant to read through the records of the annals to help him to sleep, and he reads about what Mordecai did. You see how God sets the timing is perfect. Oh, I'm running out of time. We might have to continue on Monday. But Mordecai could also, because we forget that these people are just human beings. They are normal, ordinary people with normal, fleshly, human natures and desires. And after Mordecai had saved the king's life, basically, Mordecai could have been thinking, wow, I saved the king's life and I get nothing for it. I get nothing for it. I get no recognition. I get no promotion. I get nothing. But God's timing was perfect. God saw a bigger picture. God said to Mordecai, or God didn't say it to Mordecai directly, but God was saying, Mordecai, yes, you're not getting your promotion and your recognition now, but it's coming. Just wait for it. Be patient. And how often do we do something enormous for the Lord? It feels enormous for us. Enormous and incredible. And then we wait for the doors to fly open, for the way to be made clear, for the recognition we so deserve. And nothing happens. Nothing. And then we think, Lord, I did this for you and I did that for you. And God is saying to you, it's about timing, my child. It's about timing. Mordecai got his reward for his actions in the timing of God. But because again, it wasn't just about Mordecai. It was about the Jewish people. If Mordecai had got his reward when he did the thing that he did, then this whole part of the story where Haman, his enemy, is humiliated and humbled in front of him wouldn't have happened the way it happened. God's timing. God's timing. Just amazing. I just bless you with wisdom and revelation to know the timing of the Lord. I bless you with an impartation of the Issachar anointing, to know the times and the seasons, not just in your life, but in the lives of those around you. To know the times and the seasons for what God has called you to. I just release an impartation for radical obedience. Radical obedience, and I release a revelation of knowledge to know that whatever is happening, it's not just about you. It is about you because God loves you, He adores you, you're His child, you're His son, you're His daughter. But it's never just about you because God has other sons and other daughters that He also loves and adores that need to be impacted by what God has called you to do. And I just release wisdom and revelation over you for this weekend. I release wisdom and revelation for you over as we celebrate Purim on Sunday. I just release wisdom and revelation over you that your Esther 4:14 moment, that your Moses burning bush moment will not pass you by, but you will turn aside and pay attention and receive whatever God is calling you to. Because we are all called. We all have destiny. We all have purpose. And I'm going to stop there. I would love to go on. I could literally go on for another hour, but it's been an hour. almost. And we will carry on. We will finish the story of Esther on Monday. Start your week with Sally at 7 a.m. And we will finish the story of Esther then, after the day after Purim. It's fitting. Love you all. Bless you all. Have blessed, abundantly blessed weekends. See you Monday.